We're going to move on to the oil cooler and remote mount oil cooler, oil filter relocation setup from Improved Racing. Ta-da, shout out to them. Shout out to Road Race 1. They hooked me up with this kit. Super helpful. I sent him a text real quick to ask him a question about the install, and he responded super quickly. So if you need it, get it from him. Also not sponsored. Shameless plug. So basically, this comes with directions as well. There's a couple different directions. I'm going to walk you through everything. Everything comes pre-labeled, which is nice. But the first step, as far as doing this, is removing the front bumper, because you're going to need access to behind the radiator. If you've never removed one of these, basically you just pull these two clips out right here and here. And then underneath the front bumper, basically like in this area on the other side where this fender line is, there's two nuts that mount to the studs for the front bumper. Once you pull those off, you just kind of have to pull the whole bumper off the car. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll go from there. All right, so got the front bumper off. I am attempting to get the oil filter off so I can remove the housing, but whatever fuckface decided that you didn't need to be able to remove the filter, I can't get it off. I also can't unscrew it. I tried to punch a screwdriver through it to try and turn it, and that didn't work out very well. I'm going to try again, but it's kind of draining the oil out right now at the moment. Thanks, whoever did this. All right, with a little persuasion, I got it off. So you can see that dent right there was somebody hammered into the oil filter to be able to get it past the K-member to get it off. However, the thing was on so fucking tight, I had to jam a screwdriver through it to get it off. Also, got to run to the parts store. I realized I do not have a 1/2-inch hex to put in that hole to remove that part, which makes the oil cooler come off. So I got to go waste about another half an hour, run into the parts store. All right, so removing the factory oil cooler filter housing. Basically, I just took this top hose off. There is way more coolant in there than I anticipated. I guess that makes sense. It probably drains out of the block, but there is 4 bolts. I don't know if you can see that. There, kind of over by the exhaust manifolds. It's hard to see. You remove those. You got to remove this little center nut adapter thing, and then once you do all that, that should come out, and then I can start mounting the new one. Here we go. So FYI, those two pieces, that oil cooler piece and that piece, come apart. That one unscrews or pulls off basically. That leaves you with your section on the block right there. That's where the new adapter goes. There's 4 bolts to get that out. Once you take that piece off, it's pretty easy to get to. So I'm chugging along. I got my block adapter assembled with everything it needs. So you have coolant hose port. You have your oil in, your oil out. That's for my oil pressure gauge, and then that's for the factory oil pressure gauge. I don't have those fully in yet, but I wanted to make sure they fit with how I mounted them before I did anything else. I got to make a quick part store run, and I'm going to get back to it, and then I'm almost done and can start on my K-member. Working on installing the remote mount bracket for the filter / oil cooler setup. So basically, if you follow the directions from Improved Racing, you're going to take this bracket, level it. You're going to use this hole here, this factory one, and you're going to use this other one that you're going to have to drill. Now, important note, this bumper bracket is incredibly hard. It's some sort of pressed, hardened steel. It is terrible to drill through. I ended up buying a set of 3/8 drill bits from Amazon that are cobalt, that are meant for hardened steel, and it still took me a while to get through this hole. I actually didn't even open it up the whole way that it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be 3/8, but it's big enough to get the nut there, the bolt through, so it's good enough for me. So basically what you're going to do there's this like little sandwich plate thing. That's going to go in the back. You can see there's my bolt hole. You're going to level that, and then you're going to bolt this other bracket on the front. There you go, like so. And that is going to be how your filter mounts to the bumper support bracket. All right, so I got the bracket mounted. Before I tighten everything up, zoom this out a little. I'm just going to make sure this is level. It tells you in the instructions, but also probably kind of a good idea that you want your oil filter to be level. So I just have this little magnetic one. It's pretty close right there. So I'm just going to tighten this bracket up, and then the remote oil filter mounts to that bracket. And I ran into a problem. So I have everything mounted, but as after following the directions, this places the oil filter directly in front of the fog light housing, meaning I cannot put the bumper back on unless I want to delete my fog light. So back to the drawing board, I'm going to attempt to move this closer in to the crash beam on the bumper and hope that works. I'm going to test mount it and make sure it's going to fit before I drill more holes. Always something. This is the part that you never see on YouTube. The part of projects that don't go well. So if you saw just a second ago, that hole does not work because it doesn't fit with the fog lights in the bumper cover. So I drilled another one. It takes forever. This thing's super hard to drill through. I finally accepted defeat and decided to take the whole bumper bar off the car to make it easier to drill. However, you'll notice my Sharpie mark right there. That is how far off that hole is for my bolt to go through this bracket. So here's the little bracket, right? I'm using that end as my mark. You can see if I kind of stick the bolt in there, I'm a little bit off on the hole. So back to the drawing board. I already drilled the hole out a little further than in 7/8. I went or 3/8. I went 7/16. I decided I'm going to try and grind this hole out a little bit, just to oval it some, because I don't want to take too much of this off so the bracket still works. Went and got myself a carbide Dremel cutter bit. I'm going to see if I can shave this edge down some so I can get the bolts in, and then I can move on to the next part of this project. I'm not going to lie, this oil cooler has taken me about twice as long as I was anticipating it to take. Sometimes that's how it be, though. Also, tip, I had hellacious time drilling through that bumper, and I couldn't get through it with anything. I bought these. These were $9 at Harbor Freight. They're meant for cutting tile. They look like this. They're like a spear shape, basically. Now, I broke two of them, but one of them did eventually cut through the hole that I was having a really hard time getting through. And it broke that one too, but it worked for $9 to get through the hole that I spent an hour trying to drill through, just for reference for anybody. All right, well, that actually worked really well. Thanks, carbide cutter bit. I ovaled this hole out a little bit. I didn't have to go clear to my Sharpie mark, and I'm able to get the bracket on so I can actually finally move forward on this damn project. All right, so part 2 or 3 or whatever part we are on of this oil cooler install is mounting the oil cooler itself. So this is the one, that standard one that comes in the improved racing kit. They actually make a bigger one. However, I was worried that the bigger one was not going to fit with the heat exchanger. It's pretty tight. So this is the MHX 520, I believe. So basically, there's your oil cooler right there. All it is a heat exchanger, essentially. Comes with a couple O-ring boss fittings for the ends. And then up here, there's this bracket, right? So the bracket actually mounts in the 2 factory holes in the front radiator support frame rail. And then the exchanger, oil cooler, whatever you want to call that, fits onto the bracket from the top. Now the bottom requires some modification once again. So here's your bottom bracket. I just lost a bolt. So the bottom bracket essentially comes down here, bolts to your oil cooler, and then this bottom section mounts to the crash bar. If you notice, that's a hole. You know, it's not in the crash bar, a hole. What that means is I got to drill another one. So basically what you're going to do, you're going to mount this up, you're going to attach this to your oil cooler, and then you're going to mark where this hole is on your crash beam, and you're going to drill that out. And then it comes with a jack nut to install into the bumper bar, which I'll show you how to do. I actually had to Google how to install a jack nut because I've never used one before. It seems relatively simple, so hopefully it goes okay. But then once I do that, I pretty much am almost done. I just got to mount the lines and then run the actual oil cooler adapter that goes onto the block as well. But that should be hopefully pretty easy. So I think I'm on the better half of this install at this point. Moving on, the instructions for the oil filter cooler adapter for these cars gives you a hose. This hose needs cut right there, which is here on the hose. It looks like on the Cobras you only use part of the hose. So I'll get my razor blade out, we're gonna cut that and then keep working. Almost done here. So this thing goes like this, essentially from the thermostat to the block plate. Because on the Cobra is where the alternator is positioned, down on the bottom, you need a little extra length. So I bought this. I got these from the parts store. I don't remember where. Basically, they're just little hose repair connector things. And then I bought another piece of hose to extend it a little bit, but I realized since I'm not using this piece, I just cut off the end here. I'm going to use that on the other side to extend it so I don't have to spend $30 on a piece of hose that I didn't need. Ta-da. So I'm going to see if this fits and then go from there. So I lied. That doesn't fit. It's too short. I need, because of how long the fitting is on the adapter, I need probably about that much. So I'm going to cut this where it starts to bend, and I think that'll give me enough to get that on there. Just kidding. I guess I could have cut a little bit longer from this. So you might be able to reuse this if you don't cut it too short, but that's too late for me. So on we go. All installed. This install took me way longer than I anticipated. Working on it after work, plus a few hours today, plus a few runs to the parts store, plus having a hard time drilling through this bumper beam. It took me about 3 days. I don't know how many hours. So here's the final product. Lines coming out. Run down through there. They get kind of zip tied to the frame rail. Run down underneath. And then here is your adapter plate. It's hard to see. Hold on. There you go. With your fittings and everything in there. That's a tight squeeze, man. Tight squeeze. I'm hoping this clears my sway bar. I don't see why it won't, but the Maxima Motorsports does move the sway bar mounts forward a bit. We'll see how that goes. But I think it'll have enough room. So time to move on to the K-member finally. I was hoping to be done with it today, and here we are. So I thought I was done with this oil cooler install. Joke's on me. Incorrect. Here's the problem. Sway bar bracket. Now the Maxima Motorsports kit moves the sway bar forward a little bit, but actually I think that helps me more than hurts me. The problem is the sway bar I cannot mount to the bracket because the oil, the coolant hose that ran from the adapter, the block adapter, to the original thermostat housing right there is completely in the way of the sway bar. So back to the drawing board. I'm going to have to try and figure something out. I really don't want to have to do a coolant crossover delete and spend more money on this project. I'm going to mount the sway bar and then take a look and see what sort of room I have and see if I can figure anything out. Well, after a trip to O'Reilly's, shameless plug, also not sponsored. Anyways, here's what I've come up with. I found two hoses that may work. This one has this nice 90-degree bend in it that I can use, and it's 1.75 inside diameter on the side that I need to go into the oil cooler, so I could potentially cut this, use the reducer that comes in the kit, use this coupler, and plug it into my original one. Honestly, the thing that seems like is going to work the easiest is if I reuse this and then shorten this end that goes to the oil cooler a little bit, cut some of this down so it's a little shorter, use a 90-ish sort of bend, and I think that will get me where I need. The other option is the hose that I have in here right now. I'm going to try this one first. So this one, conveniently, let me see if you can see that. There you go. Actually mounts to my adapter plate, and it reduces on this side conveniently to 1.5 inside diameter, where I can just plug it into a coupler and use my factory hose if I shorten that a little bit. So the first thing I think I'm going to try is I'm going to shorten this one because it's a little long. I'm going to attempt to trim this side a little bit, see if I can shove that on the block adapter and use this kind of 90-degree bend to couple it to the factory one and see where that gets me. Here's your part number. Here's your part number for the other one. I got both of those at O'Reilly's. I will post in the video here in a second, well, in your case a second, what I end up doing. I'll give you the part numbers, so hopefully that helps somebody else if they ever try and do this install. All right, I thought this one was going to work. I cut about, I don't know, whatever that is, maybe 3 inches or so off the one end. And it's pretty close. The downfall is I would still need to shorten it another inch or two. And at that point, the hose starts to go from 1 3/4 to 1 1/2, which does not fit on the adapter that is on the block plate, which is 1 3/4. So don't buy this one. I just wasted $45 on it. Option 2, also from O'Reilly's. There's your part number. I'm thinking I'm going to be able to trim this, use this 90 bend, trim the other end, kind of just use this L shape, and then I'm going to have to trim the factory one a little bit, use the reducer that came in the kit, and hopefully that should work. So that's going to be option number 2. Here we go. So hard to see with the mess down here, but I think I've come to a solution. So I'm going to pull this out of the car and show you what I did. But factory coolant hose off of the thermostat. I shortened it a little bit right there. Coupler. Cut up that other piece I just showed you into the block adapter. And I think that's going to work. So here's what ended up happening. These are how much I cut off the factory oil cooler. You can see it says that right there. So that is the end that went to the oil cooler. I cut off, I don't know, however much that was. Here's my tape measure. Sorry, that's hard to do with one hand. Hold on. All right, I cut off about 3 inches or so off of that. Reason being, because this is 1 1/2 inch and this hose is 1.75 or 1 3/4, you need this little adapter, right? It goes in there. You're also going to need a hose connector. Ta-da. This is a 1 1/2 to 1 1/2 plastic coupler. You can buy these at the parts store. So that went together like that, right? that hose, that part number I just showed you, I trimmed quite a bit off both ends. I don't remember which end this was, but I trimmed that off. And I trimmed a few inches off the other end. So I ended up with this short little 90-degree bend with one leg that's a little shorter and one leg that's a little longer. The longer one is going to go to the block plate. The shorter leg is going to connect to your piece. So let me show you how this all went together. So that is your final product roughly. So here's your original oil cooler hose. If you don't mind cutting it up a little bit, it obviously clears the alternator because it's made from Ford. In the middle, you have your coupler, plastic thing. You're going to put some clamps there. There's my reducer that comes in the Improved Racing kit already. They use this in the actual kit to reduce down your hose so that it goes to the thermostat housing. However, I'm using it to go to this hose. Works kind of just the same. Here's that other hose I cut up. So basically it's going to sit in the car like this. It's going to wrap around your alternator, come up, connect to my block plate, and clears my sway bar and seems like it should work. Ta-da. Now I can say I think I'm officially done with this stupid install unless something else goes wrong still.